Hey everybody, I'm Michael, I'm alcoholic. How's everybody doing?
Fantastic.
Solid? Nice. All right, let's pray. God, grant us serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. That was like the most peaceful serenity prayer I might have ever heard. Everybody must be reaching enlightenment or something like that. Oh, Steve and Clay. Yeah, Clay. Aaron, yeah. All right, so we're moving along. We're going to do 6 and 7 tonight, which will be a little strange, but I think we'll be fine. At this point in the workshop, has anybody never been to the workshop before? John? Where's John? Oh, what's your name? Brandon, welcome to the workshop. I see you sitting with some good guys over there. I'm sure they can catch you up. And I can't see you really, but I can see you now. The weather's been tough for some people, and we had the Super Bowl, so I know some folks missed. But it's very encouraging to see such a big group here. And how's everybody doing? Everybody get their 4 steps done?
Yes.
Got some thumbs ups? Dylan? Anybody not? Couple people? Okay. That's okay. Get it done. Keep trudging. Who's done their first 4-step in this workshop? Oh, a few people. Okay. That's encouraging. Cool. You? Solid? Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Who's still working on their 4-step? It's okay. Anybody have any questions about that? No questions at all? Solid. Okay. Well, let's read the tradition for the night. It's tradition 6. And tradition 6 says, problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim. We think, therefore, that any considerable property of genuine use to AA should be separately incorporated and managed, thus dividing the material from the spiritual. An AA group, as such, never should go into business. Secondary aids to AA, such as clubs or hospitals, which require much property or administration, ought to be incorporated and so set apart that, if necessary, they can be freely discarded by the groups. Hence, such facilities ought not to use the AA name. Their management should be the sole responsibility of those people who financially support them. For clubs, AA managers are usually preferred, but hospitals as well as other places of recuperation ought to be well outside AA and medically supervised. While an AA group may cooperate with anyone, such cooperation never ought to go so far as affiliation or endorsement, actual or even implied. An AA group can bind itself to no one. So what that means, folks, is that when early day, all these traditions were learned. We learned them from mistakes, and so early in the AA days, they tried to do that. They tried to have hospitals and different things like that, and it caused problems. And so it caused problems. The kind of problems it caused is it diverted Alcoholics Anonymous from its primary purpose, and that's to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And so if we have to focus on the management of a company or the management of a club, or if we have to focus on the administration or hiring doctors and nurses and stuff like that, then it pulls our attention or our focus away from that which we're supposed to be focused on, which is carrying the message of alcoholics is still sick and suffering alcoholic. Does that make sense? So if our home group, the primary purpose group, we do a few different treatment centers. We sponsor the Arrow Passages, Sky Point, and then recently the Ray Recovery. And the treatment center we're most involved with, I think, which would get close to affiliation, would be Arrow Passages. Arrow Passages, and I'm saying that because we have such a great relationship with them that and our home group has a CPC, and so we're able to cooperate with them to be able to help do AA in that treatment center. And so there's been times when that treatment center, they have, you know, they go to school and we don't do treatment, we do steps, and we carry the message in that way. For there was a time when the clients at the meeting would say, our counselors or our caseworkers or the administration, they do not want us to work steps. They want us to wait till we get out of here to work steps. And we go down every Friday. It's probably a 40-minute drive. And we kept hearing it. First couple of times we heard it, we didn't think no big deal of it. We just thought, you know, the clients were saying that for whatever reason. But we kept hearing it. And so it became a little bit of an issue. And the issue being that that's what we do. We carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous and enlarge through step work. And so we set up a meeting with the administration. And I met with every single caseworker, me and another fellow from the group, and we told them what we do and what we don't do and why we do it and why we don't do it. And they were extremely cooperative. And the meeting was extremely informative because a lot of the caseworkers and managers and the administration of that institution had no idea what we did. They had no clue of what was going on at all. And one of the statements that we made is if you're going to restrict your clients, which is none of our business, from working step work, by all means, you're allowed to do whatever you want to do, and it's none of our business. Not only is it none of our business, but we don't have any opinion on anything that you do or any other 12-step program or what, we don't, it's none of our business. And we don't want to imagine that we have a say-so and that we don't. But if you don't want your clients working step works, then we're going to cancel the meeting. And they were all like, no, we want you guys. And so a month later after that meeting, I got a call from the founder of that treatment center, which is the owner, and he wanted to meet with me in person. And went down and met with him, and his whole thing, he's a religious guy, and he said he had a vision, and what his vision was that all his clients would have sponsors. And there's like 30 of them in there at any given time. And so it's such a contrast from, hey, we don't want our clients getting sponsors to, hey, I want every client in here getting a sponsor. What can we do to make that happen? Right? And they offered me a job and a couple other weird things that I wasn't able to do. Get paid to be a sponsor would be cool, but I just couldn't do it. And there's a tradition for that too. But now we go down there and we go down there twice on Fridays, a group or somebody goes, and it's a great thing. The relationship we have with the caseworkers, and if we need to get their clients step work, we can just email them and they cooperate with us, which is very cool. And so it's not so much as an affiliation, it's in a cooperation. And so our home group in particular, the primary purpose group, is able to still focus on what it needs to focus on, which is helping the alcoholic who still suffers. And we're not entangled with, we got to clock in at 9 o'clock or any of that other stuff. It keeps us focused. Okay, we got a question back there? I'm sorry? No. That's the answer to that question is no. So Dr. Silkworth, who wrote the doctor's opinion, or who right? He had an opinion, and that was an opinion that he had, this allergy to alcohol, this mental obsession. I'm sorry? I can't hear him.
It was approved back, yeah.
No, it was not. It has long since been, though. So the story of that was his opinion, and he wasn't able to be public with his opinion because he had been scrutinized by the medical profession. They would have threw him out. And so that's why in the big book, when I'm talking, I can't hear you talking because you're talking. That's okay. So, but go ahead. Yes, his whole life was devoted to working with alcoholics. Absolutely, yeah. So that story, to finish, is that he was not allowed. That was his experience by working with alcoholics, is that it seemed like they have an allergy to alcohol. It seems like so forth and so on. And he didn't put it in. It's why the big book, it's called The Doctor's Opinion, because he didn't want his name in there yet. It's long since been proven, and his family has given Alcoholics Anonymous the privilege and right to use his name now because it's been proven. But way back in the 30s, that would have been looked at as some kind of blasphemy or something like that in the medical field. but his theory has certainly been proven to be true. Right on. Chris?
I was just about to say the same thing. It hadn't been proven yet back then. Like he was talking about, might I recommend checking out with the archive tradition group? They might be able to help you as well with that.
That's a place down on Main Street there.
Cool. All right, good question. Anything else? Tradition 6? Any tradition, any steps we've done so far? Okay, so we're going to start on step 6 and step 7. Who's in here has done this already? Anybody who's never done a step 6 and 7? Couple people? Cool. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
He's going to give you the capital.
What's the question, buddy?
Should I take notes on it? Like, you're just more listening or not?
Whatever you feel so compelled to do. Absolutely. If you want to take some notes, then go ahead. Corey?
So I think the question is, since he has no skills that can start on the same step, you can step out of order.
You can participate in the workshop tonight. We're going to go in that chapel and take a 7-step together, and you're welcome to do that with us. But obviously, just because you do that tonight doesn't mean you don't have to write your 4-step. That would be the only problem with maybe, you know what I mean? Yeah. So you'll get a little bit of a taste of what you're going to do tonight. Sound good? Okay. Corey, you had your hand up? Okay, cool. So we come into workshop. We a lot of us, the whole problem is a lot of us didn't know what made us powerless, right? And so if you're anything like me, you come to AA. I'm saying I'm powerless because of a lot of different things. I'm powerless because I've been to jail. I'm powerless because I'm homeless. I'm powerless because I'm on probation and parole. I'm powerless because I'm driving with no driver's license, or I lost my kids, or all these different things. And them things that those kind of consequences in our life absolutely would point to a bigger problem, by all means. But for the most part, those are outside circumstances. And so the big book is very clear. It says if I have to admit complete defeat, right? The big book, the 12 and 12 says if an alcoholic does not admit complete defeat, their sobriety, if any, will be precarious. All right? And so the problem is that I cannot admit complete defeat over alcohol or alcoholism if I really don't know what it is. And page 30 in the big book says I got to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic, and this is the first step in recovery. And so if I'm not able to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic simply because I don't know what it is, then I'm screwed. I'm in big trouble. And there's a factor that we always got to consider, and that's the grace of God. The grace of God will keep me for a time. You see, but I really, really need the depth of being beaten. I need the depth of hopelessness that occurs in the 5th step to be able to be successful with the rest of the steps. I really do. An alcoholic like me, I just simply do. I've been in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous for a very long time, saying my name's Mike and I'm an alcoholic, and having zero idea of what that even means. Had no clue. Thought I knew, just like everything else. So we come here, we learn about the physical allergy, the mental obsession, the spiritual malady. Some of us already kind of knew that. Some of us needed a refresher. Then we go to step 2, and we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. And if the trending quote as far as step 2 would be, all I got to do is be willing. Willing to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. That is 100% true. But if you look in the big book, there was a lot of other things leading up to that consideration. Laying aside my prejudices, expressing a willingness to believe, asking what these spiritual terms mean to me, so forth and so on. Now, that lays that out for a particular reason, because if I just go straight to, am I willing to believe? Yes, I'm willing to believe. That's easy for me to do, but a lot of us come here beat up. And so it's one thing to believe that God can restore me to sanity, and I can admit that in my mind, but in my heart I really believe that God don't want to restore me to sanity because I'm such a piece of crap, right? Or God, the lady last night at the meeting said, this God thing, I feel like I was praying to the air. Like we don't know what that is. And so when I lay aside these, to some degree, all of us what we believe about God is summed up by our past experiences, and coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and trying to have a new experience, I'm going to believe about God what you told me to believe about God instead of having my own experience with God. And so we come to find out that God is so big and so powerful and so loving that he can have a personal relationship with each and every one of us individually. And what is in the way of that is me. All my prejudices, the things I believe, the things I don't believe, all that stuff. And we start nipping away at that stuff. And the questions in the chapter, We Agnostics, there are a lot of questions and considerations to help me have an open mind. The chapter is written so spiritually that every single thing in the chapter, We Agnostics, it just helps me have a better open mind. And with an open mind, God has an opportunity to show up in my heart. And so we do the second step. We have a good experience with getting some of that crap out of the way. Wherever we start with or whatever we start with as a belief about God, we come to it here. We learn that the problem is not alcohol. Alcohol is not my problem, that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my troubles, and that I'm the problem, right? And so we go to the chapel, we get down on our knees, the big book gives us a prayer to pray. God, I offer myself to thee, right? And if you've been sober for a length of time, you've probably prayed that prayer tons and tons and tons of times, which is it's almost you can't get it back. Especially if you take, and that's why we always say in our group that some new guy or new girl will take their third step, and we'll say to them after the step, you're not your own business anymore. We just witnessed you give yourself to God. It's almost it's like you can't get back from it. It's just like trying to go get high or drunk after you've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for a while. It just ain't the same. It just is not the same no more. The reason being because the program is very spiritual, and it's just no getting back, right? It's like you turn colors and you can't get your old color back. And it's because something happens inside of us spiritually. So the best we can, we offer our thoughts and our actions to God to do with as he will. And from there on out, God's going to be the director, so forth and so on. And we try to do that as best we can. And what the big book does is it gives us a super cool tool, which is the 4th step. The super tool is where we can look at resentments, and I can look at fears, and I can look at sex, and I can look at my conduct. And those 4 areas pretty much cover every single area of my life. And when I'm looking at these things and I'm looking at my mistakes, which none of us really ever do, and some of us do look at our mistakes, but we're so selfish that we can't quite get there. I can't quite see what the problem is. The big book says in the resentment inventory, this is as far as most of us ever got. Yeah, I was resentful at Bo because he stole my Harley and affected my self-esteem, that son of a bitch. And that's as far as I'll ever get. You see what I'm saying? Without me being able to take any responsibility in any of those things. The 12 and 12 would say that we are constantly choosing comfort over character building. We're gluttons, and we're just such pleasure-seeking. We just, somewhere along the line in our life, because of the unmanageability or the spiritual malady of alcoholism, we are constantly looking for comfort, and we get so used to chasing comfort and chasing peace in that way through our managing that this idea that character building is going to take a little bit of work, it's going to take a little bit of effort, and we miss it. We miss it completely. And so we think that in the way that we pursued comfort and we pursued pleasure and we pursued all these different things, that's the same way that this character building is going to come, and it just doesn't. It's just simply different. And if you're like any good alcoholic, you come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and proof of that would be when I come here, the very first time I see the 12 steps, the 12 steps have zero to nothing to do with my life at all, especially as a newcomer. It does not make sense to me. As a newcomer, completely asleep to spiritual things, completely asleep that there's a better way. The idea that a new guy, I think there's Corey is the only one maybe I've ever heard of that came to AA and looked at the 12 steps and said, that's the way. I'm going to do that. That's going to make everything better. Most alcoholics come here and see them 12 steps and well, what the hell does that got to do with anything? Right? And so we're so selfish and we're so self-centered. A guy that I listen to says we're like ingrown hairs. Right? We're like ingrown. We're just so focused on ourselves that we can't see anything outside of our way, my thinking, my managing, so forth and so on. And so in writing an inventory, a personal inventory, we get to start seeing how I'm the fault, how I'm the blame, what my mistakes are, how I got in my own way. to see that everything I do, even when I mean to do good, I'm very selfish. I'm very self-centered, and I don't even know it. Then we go to a fifth step, and we read these things, which is a very humbling experience for most of us, unless you've done it multiple times and you get to see the joy and the fulfillment in the fifth step. First off, going through, hopefully you'll have the willingness or the desperation to want to do it. You'll hear of other people talking about it. Obviously, you've not experienced it for yourself, especially the first go around, and you do a fifth step mostly because you just want to stay sober, right? We do this fifth step, we read our 4 steps too. The big book says we tell somebody our whole life story. Right? We tell somebody our whole life story. Here's the good, the bad, the ugly. Here's the thing I did back in New York back in 1980 that I was never going to tell nobody ever before. I'm going to tell them everything, right? Which we've never done. We're such stuffers. We stuff everything down inside, and we think for whatever reason that that's a good way to deal with life. It's just it's counterproductive at depth. And we learn that by being free, by being honest, that we gain the fearlessness and humility it takes to have this experience with God, which overcomes alcoholism. And so we do that, and the fifth step says to go on that we do what? We ask God from the bottom of our heart. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better, right? That's the first thing He asks us to do. We take our book down from the shelf, carefully reviewing the first 5 steps. It says we go home for an hour. So we take an hour, and that significant amount of time. I tell my guys, hey, I don't care if it's a whole hour, but make sure it's a significant amount of time. And most of the guys will take an hour, right? But that hour is a very precious time to kind of go over what you've done. And so we're such in a hurry. We've been can't quiet our minds. It's just been polluted with never-ending thoughts, a chatter of 1,000 monkeys, somebody would say that would be like. And so for the first time after a fifth step, that quiets the mind down a little bit, and we have a little bit of peace. And the first thing the big book asks us to do is thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. And it's such a counterintuitive thing for us to think of that by me revealing every dark, twisted cranny of my past to another human being is going to get me closer to God. To us, that doesn't make sense. There's some of us religious people. We've never heard that before. It seems different, so forth and so on. And then we go to step 6. And step 6 is willingness. And we've emphasized willingness is what the big book would say. Step 6 reads, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And in the big book, it reads simply, if when finished, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. If we can answer to our satisfaction, which is the questions in the 5th step, are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? If we can answer to our satisfaction, meaning what that's asking us really is, after I go through the first 5 steps, do I really believe I'm powerless? Have I really conceded to my innermost self? Do I believe God can restore me to sanity? Or am I holding on to something weird there? When I made my decision, did I do it as best as I could? Did I voice it without reservation? Did I leave something out of my 4th step? Did I write it down but not tell my sponsor or whoever I'm reading my 5th step to? And it gives us these different kind of looks at it, but that's really what it's asking us to do. And it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go of, we ask God to help us be willing. So, when I first come to Alcoholics Anonymous and wrote I bet you it was probably, I don't know, a couple of the years of doing step work and being sober before I really was able to even I could identify character defects as selfishness and resentment and fear and stuff like that. But new sobriety, a few years sober, I really still didn't understand or grasp what this character defect stuff was, right? I had a major, major spiritual awakening as a result of working the steps early on. And to some degree, it was just such a powerful experience that I didn't even know what was going on, right? I wrote my 4th step. I did my 5th step. I prayed to God help me be willing. I prayed the 7th step prayer. And then I just caught fire, right? That's what mostly happens. Mostly happens to everybody. We get all excited. We start having spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening. We don't even know what the hell is going on. But after you've been sober for a while, step 6 and step 7 really take on a whole different meaning. And if you look in our big book, it's very short, maybe a couple of paragraphs that the big book has to offer in regards to steps 6 and 7. But if you look into 12 and 12, there's a great amount of pages. And the opinion on reason why that is because Bill Wilson, when he wrote the big book, was very new sober, just like I was new sober, walking on the pink cloud. Everything was great. I prayed the prayer. God took all these grosser handicaps away, and it was wonderful, right? But then he stayed sober for a while. 15 years sober is when he wrote the 12 and 12, and he has a little bit more to say about the step 6 and step 7. And step 6, it opens up. This is the step which separates the men from the boys. Right? And it's all about a humility. And so if you're anything like me in your sobriety, I had tons and tons of problems coming here. Like I had legal issues and parental issues and relational issues and financial issues. And I got every issue there is that you can possibly have, which is common for a new person sober. A new person sober is going to have tons and tons and tons of problems. And they're going to be kicking their ass. And that ass kicking that we get as a result of those consequences, what happens is the good news about that, it keeps us very humble. It keeps, I got this going on, my kids is in CSP and the bills, and if I don't do this, I'm going to go to jail. Blah, we got all this shit, and it's just more than us, which is such a blessing. And that keeps me humble. That keeps me doing my step work. It keeps me showing up early to the meetings. It keeps me putting up the chairs. It keeps me doing all the things necessary. But what happens at about a couple years sober is all that stuff starts to get better. All of it gets better. Kids back, got me a good job, got some money in the bank, got me a couple credit cards, the car starts on the first try. All kinds of cool stuff is going on. You know what I mean? And guess what happens? If you're an alcoholic like me, then what you're going to do exactly like I did, and you're going to start to think that you're the shit. I got it all figured out. And I'm going to think this without trying to think it. It's going to happen subconsciously to some degree. Because I'm an alcoholic and because I'm so selfish and I'm so self-centered and because I'm so driven by those things, consequently what's going to happen is without me even knowing, I'm going to drift back into selfishness. I'm going to start not exposing all the things to my sponsor that I used to, right? I'll tell my sponsor, when I'm new sober, everything go. I'll tell you everything, whatever I'm thinking, what I'm doing. If I blew it, everything just came out. And after you start having that happen sober, then my 100% honesty factor, my absolute honesty that I had with the sponsor early on starts to whittle its way down to about 90%. Now I'm about 90% honest with my sponsor about what's going on in my life, what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, what I'm feeling. Then if it goes on, the problem with that is that 90%, and if I get away with 90, then what's going to happen next is I'm going to be 80% honest with my sponsor. Then I'm going to be 70, then I'm going to be 60, then I'm going to be 50, and then it's just going to continue to go back. And so what happens is we learn early in our sobriety that this absolute honesty, when life was kicking my ass and at me at every turn, I had a great, powerful experience as a result of it. My sponsor had some intuitive things to say to me. The program really seemed to work. I started seeing God in everywhere and everything. And what happens is that's what happens when we practice that way of life. But as we're sober for a length of time, those ass-kicking problems to some degree disappear. And so then the self reemerges, the ego resurfaces, the ego regrows again, right? Now I got problems, now I got different problems. What? The same spiritual principles or the same spiritual tools that I used to have major spiritual experiences that were taught to me in Alcoholics Anonymous, somehow my ego and my selfishness starts to wrap around them spiritual tools and I become very selfish. Now I can't tell you everything because I'm afraid of what you're going to think of me. Now I'm starting to, if I'm not being honest here, it's going to start participating. That dishonesty is going to start affecting my life over here. And if I start to get a little dishonest and I'm starting to manage again, the thing about managing is if I manage in an area or if a fear pops up in my life, it seems to double Meaning, if I get afraid of failure or being alone or whatever I got, or what you think of me, or this need for this incessant need for approval, which I think is a plague. When I got that stuff going on and I'm not being honest about that stuff, what happens is if I tolerate it and permit it by dishonesty, not being sincere with another human being, what happens is that approval seeking, this whatever it may be, will double. And that one thing that we thought was no big deal, I'm just going to stuff it down deep inside myself because I've been sober for a couple years now. I got it going on. Now, I can't tell you everything about myself. It'll double. And that too, it's the same thing. If it's permitted through dishonesty, through deception, through manipulation, through shying away from the truth, whether dishonesty, whether we could be just simply by omission, it'll turn to 4. And then 4 to 8, and then 8 to 16, and so forth and so on. And the next thing you know, I'm very isolated. I don't feel close to you no more because the connection that I had with you was through this great amount of honesty and working this program. Now I feel isolated and I'm separate from you and I'm separate from everybody else. And I'm sponsoring guys and I'm going to do talks and doing all this stuff. But deep inside, I feel really weird on the inside because my outside life's not matching up to how I really feel on the inside. You see, in this humility that this step 6 is talking about, when it says, this is the step which separates the men from the boys, it means it because it gets tough. It gets really tough sometimes, guys. In order to practice a humility in a way throughout your sobriety every year, through year 3, 4, whatever, 1 all the way up to wherever, it takes, usually what happens is people get their butt kicked. Usually what happens is people hit these new bottoms in sobriety and something happens where they're forced to do something different or to be honest about what they have going on in their life for the first time in years and years and years. And you're either forced to do that or you drink. If we are not, I've been sober for 16 years and everybody that I got sober with in my first couple years of sobriety, I could not mention on my hand, there's hundreds of people coming in AA when I got sober, just like there's hundreds of people coming in now. And I remember some of them and some of them I don't remember, but I cannot tell you on the count of my hand somebody with 15, 16, or 17 years sober. I'm the only person I know. Does that make sense to you? Like we say, hey, I got a year, he got a year, he got 2 years and 3 years, everybody's clapping. Well, that's awesome. But these middle-aged, 15, 10 plus years sober, we don't hear about them very much. And the reason why is because of some stuff like we're going to talk about with the 6th step and the 7th step. It's very, very vital, important. And we have to maintain a humility. It's easier, I would say, to maintain the humility necessary in regards to being able to stay current and honest with somebody. But if things happen in your life, like you have to get a new sponsor, that's been my experience. I've had to get a new sponsor. It makes things a little bit more difficult. And so then I take the bit in the teeth, is what the big book would say. And I know the bit in the teeth is talking about amends, but the bit in the teeth is certainly applicable in my life as an alcoholic having to get a new sponsor at 9 years sober and had the same sponsor for my whole sobriety. Very difficult. Now I got a new relationship with a new person. I don't trust them all the way because I don't know them and I'm supposed to be honest with somebody. You see, and so it becomes very difficult. And so that kind of got off the beam in my sobriety, probably around a few years. So at 5 years sober, I would say I hit a bottom. But the 5 year sober bottom I hit was a result of what I did at 3 years sober and 4 years sober. You see, it led up to it. And so if you heard of somebody is having a slip, the slip doesn't necessarily mean that we drink. The slip means that sobriety lost its priority. And when we say sobriety lost its priority, that does not necessarily mean that I'm not getting to meetings. I was going to meetings and doing the things and showing up and doing those things, but I'm not being honest about what's going on inside me, you see, and I'm lying a little bit. And so when I first got sober, I told you everything. I'm feeling this way. I'm mad at so-and-so. I'm thirstier than an old bucket. You know what I mean? Whatever the truth is, I'm honest with it because my ass is on fire. Now I'm sober and I have a little sobriety. I don't feel that same way, so I'm not quite as honest. So now I'll tell you about if I think about drinking, but I'm not going to tell you about my sex life Now, if I'm thinking about a resentment I had as someone in AA, I'll tell you, but I'm not going to tell you about what's going on at work. You see? I might tell you what's going on at the lead I did last week or the lead I didn't like or whatever the hell the discussion was about, but I'm not going to tell you about my gambling. You see? And I'll tell you about, you know, all that stuff and all those surface things, which I kind of know because we're masters of it, you guys. We've been managing our lives for our whole life. We have relied on ourselves to get us through, and to some degree out there in them streets or in them bars or wherever it was, it worked. It worked. How do I know it worked? Because you're here. And we had to learn tools to survive out there, and we learned them. The problem is those tools they don't work here. They don't work in the sober world. You see? And so we already know how to do it. It's almost innate in us. It's in our DNA. It's so ingrained with us as how to be manipulative and dishonest and so forth and so on. We just know how to do it so very well. And so now I'm sober for a while. I'm telling you maybe 60%, 70% of what's really going on in my life. And so what about the other 30? The other 30 or 40% that I'm keeping to myself will grow and double and grow and double. And alcoholism wants to get me isolated. It wants me to be apart from you. Does anybody out in here, let me ask this question, because most people in here has been sober. Is there any brand new ass problem that you got? What you got, Brandon?
Ex that left me.
Okay, right on. That makes sense. But character defect wise, what's a brand new one that you never had before that all of a sudden you got? Anybody? Go ahead, Dylan. Gambling? Okay. Yeah, but my guess is you probably already. So the reason I asked that question is because the amount of hands that go up is very small. Because there ain't no brand new damn problems. The problems aren't brand new. But if you look in the big book where it says whether or not we can quit upon a spiritual basis, you guys know where that is in the big book? Anybody? Whether or not we can quit upon a non-spiritual basis. Can somebody find that for me? Whether or not we can quit upon a non-spiritual basis. So every sin or every character defect, if you want to think about character defects, especially when we're talking about 6 and 7, is an attempt to be happy apart from God. Right? It's an attempt to be happy apart from God. When I manage, I damage. It's a fact. There's not a single person in this room, and you could fill this room up double, you could triple this room up, and it wouldn't matter, it'd still be the same quote. The quote is there's no such thing as a perfect person. None of us are perfect, and we all have things going on, right? And so we're masters of looking at your outside and trying to figure out my inside, and it don't work, you see? And so what I'm going to start having is these different fears of what you think of me. Go ahead, Brandon.
I think it's in we agnostic on page 44.
Okay.
It says be doomed in alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis. The alternatives. And then it says, but after a while, down into the next paragraph, in the middle-ish. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life.
Mine says chapter 3 more about alcoholism.
What page, Mitch?
30 or 43. 34.
34, let's read it. Okay. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Here it is. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. So if you think of that, now it's easy for us to come in here, alcohol or whatever the hell else you was doing, whooped your ass. It made you homeless. It made you go to rehabs and detoxes. You lost your jobs. Some of us are higher bottoms than others, and some of us are lower bottoms than others. But consequently, usually the consequences are what drive us here. The consequences of alcoholism, as far as a character defect, is a little bit more crafty. Alcoholism is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And so if you read that statement, whether such a person can quit watching porn upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Whether such a person can quit Gambling upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which the person has lost the power of choice. And so alcoholism and whatever the defective character may be are absolutely related. They're absolutely the same principles apply. It could be your anger. It could be you're a rager. It could be you're lazy. I'm slothful, lazy dude. Whether I can stop being lazy on a non-spiritual basis completely depends upon the extent to which I've already lost the power to choose. You already know, we already know, to some degree, whether we've lost the power to choose. Some of our character defects, the ones that we don't want to be honest about with nobody, which is usually, it's almost inevitably, not everybody in here may be up to relate to that, but if you're an alcoholic like I am, you're going to be able to 100% relate to that. I don't want to let everybody know what I'm doing because I'm afraid of what they're going to think of me, especially with the freaky stuff, the sexual stuff. If I blew the money gambling, a ton of it, and got myself in a jam, we're ashamed of those things, and we don't want to tell anybody. Right? And so we keep it to ourselves. And the problem with keeping it to yourself, there's no difference from me keeping those kind of things in myself than me saying, I'm going to quit drinking on my own power. It's exactly the same thing, you guys. Exactly the same thing. Excuse me. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? So whatever character defect in sobriety, most people in here has been sober for a while. And so it's going to be anger, sex, money. It's going to be different, stuff like that we just don't want to talk about. And we're going to be ashamed of, and we're going to feel, what I found is in the very most difficult things I've had to tell people, what I've been matched with with the courage it took for me to be honest about such things, I was matched with community and togetherness and a unity that I would not have had before. And no different than when I was first sober and I would go to the meeting and the fellows would be like, Mike, how are you doing? And I would lie and say, I'm doing good, because I don't know really how I'm doing. How you doing, Mike? I'm doing okay. How you doing, Mike? I'm doing good. And I don't know, right? And I just am lying. I don't even know I'm lying. And I'm resentful and I got these different things going on, but I don't know what I don't know. And so what I found in the story is I went home, I was living in a sober house, I was extremely resentful because the people in the sober house weren't sober, first of all, and I was sober, and I didn't know what to do. And so I told my sponsor, and I said, what am I supposed to do? And he said, what are you gonna do, snitch on them? I don't know, what am I supposed to do? And he said, what's your primary purpose? And the only reason I knew it, because I've been hearing it at the damn meetings, stay sober and help another alcoholic. He said, you focus on that. And so I did focus on that, but they started stealing my food and shit, right? They're stealing my damn everything I'd get, they just to take it. And so I'm getting on the bus, the old lady smiles at me, makes me cry because I see God in that, like, oh my God, God is everywhere. The wind would blow right, you guys, sometimes. I would just start crying because I seen God in everything and everywhere, which was just warming my heart and filling my spirit, but they're stealing my food and I want to hit him with a hammer. Something is wrong. You understand what I'm saying? Something is majorly wrong. I don't know what to do. And so one day I didn't have any food and I raked some leaves, I think, and I got $20 and I bought some cereal and some bread and some milk and some sandwich meat. I bought a few groceries and a pack of smokes. And I would never go home to the sober house during the day because it was crazy. And I went home one day to make a sandwich. And I went home, I got off the bus, I went in to make a sandwich. I reached over, got the bread, opened the fridge door, got the meat, went in for the cheese. They stole my cheese. And that was I couldn't take another stealing, right? And so the resentment had been on me for long enough. The big book became very clear to me when it said resentment is the number one offender. From it stem all form of spiritual disease. It kills more alcoholics than anything else. That's what the big book says about that, but I ain't experienced it yet, and I don't know for sure. But when I went for my cheese and the resentment spiked, I took my bread and my meat and I slam dunked it in the trash and I said, hey, it ain't working. What the fuck does that got to do with my sandwich? What does AA have to do with my cheese? Nothing. But that's how sick I got in that resentment. So I said, oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. and I'm going to get to this meeting. So I walk back outside, I walk up the street, I get to the bus stop, and guess what's at the bus stop? My empty cheese container. They took it and then left it at the damn bus stop. I was pissed. And I got to the meeting a couple hours early, and I wrote on the board, God, please help me, because I knew I was in trouble. And then I made the coffee and set the big books around and so forth and so on. Then eventually the men started coming in, and they said, God, please help me. And they'd chuckle. Ha, ha, ha. I was like, what the hell is going on? And then they started reading the big book, just like any other good big book study, and they'd share their experience with a paragraph or two, and it made it come to life. And then the one guy said, I went to Hazelden to quit smoking cigarettes, and I woke up in a white on white detox from alcohol. And in my mind, I was like, I would never go to Hazelden to quit smoking cigarettes, and if I did, I wouldn't tell nobody, right? That's exactly what I thought. I was like, there's no way I would tell that. And then I was like, shit. If he can tell about that, I could tell him about my cheese, right? I said, my name's Mike, I'm an alcoholic. They've been stealing my food today. They stole my cheese, blah, 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 blah. And everybody looked at me all crazy because my sponsor told me when I was early sober not to comment because I got nothing to say. And so I never said nothing. But this time I just let it all hang out, and they were all looking at me crazy. And then what happened was another man related his experience with the resentment that he had. He was 2 years sober. He got resentful. He was going to get a beer at the gas station. And he went in to go get a beer from the gas station at the cooler, and there was a bum at the cooler, and the bum was at the cooler, and he reached in his pocket, and he had change with lint in it. And he said he was throwing the lint balls off to the side, and he looked at my buddy, and he only had a handful of change, and he said, man, that's a high price to pay for a beer. The bum meant because he didn't have enough change, but my buddy took it a different way. And he said that's how God spoke to him. He went outside, he said he cried, he gave the bum a couple of dollars, and he called a sponsor, and he was able to stay sober because of that. But I learned intimacy at that time, at that meeting with those men. And what I thought was that if I got it going on, the old idea that I had was that if I tell you that I always am doing good, that everything's all right all the time, that you're going to think of me in a certain way, which was simply not true in Alcoholics Anonymous, because if you're an alcoholic like me, we don't know what it's like to have shit going good all the goddamn time. What do you mean you've never had a flat tire? Everything's good all the goddamn time. I'm not like you. I get selfish and self-centered, and I get fearful, and I get weird. And I do stupid shit sometimes, and I need somebody else to be able to talk to about that. And if you got it together all the time, and you never had a problem, and everything's hunky-dory all the damn time, I'm going to be intimidated by you. I'm going to be intimidated by you. Not only am I going to be intimidated by you, but I'm going to think there's something wrong with me for having the problems I have. You see? And so it's been said that, hey, the people who got it going on all the time like that, there's either one or two possible things. They're a damn hypocritical freaking bigot, or they're not a real alcoholic. Just that simple. If you've been sober for any length of time, then you know that alcoholism is very, very powerful. And you know that it gets you when you don't even know it's getting you. It's working on all of us to some degree in some form or fashion right now. On this day, alcoholism tried to sneak its way into some part of our life and drag us away. We all know that alcoholism is that cunning, baffling, and powerful. And so how could you, I am going to my home group an hour early. I'm doing 2+ talks a week all over the damn place. I'm sponsoring guys. I'm in the steps. I'm praying every day. I got every devotion there is known to man. And alcoholism's still whooping my ass, and how's it not whooping yours? That don't make sense to me. You see, in early sobriety, I would be insecure, too insecure to say that because I don't know. But I've been sober long enough to know now that that's not real. It's simply not real. There's no way you can just have shit going on all the time. It's always good. We get angry, we get fearful, we get resentful, we get weird around money, we start to manage our lives again, and it gets worse, and it's like a snowball. Right? And if I don't have people in my life, if I'm not courageous enough, I am not courageous enough, let me take that back, to be honest with you about those things on my own. I just don't got the power. I don't have the power. I didn't have it before, and I don't got it now. You see? And so I need that power. I am beat. I am powerless. Just whether such a person quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already or she has already lost the power to choose whether he or she will drink or not. And that goes for every single character defect. And tonight we're talking about 6 and 7, and most of us in here have been sober for a while. And so whatever you think of when we talk about that, it's none of my business. Tell your sponsor, tell somebody. But everybody in here got something that fits there, right? And I'm telling you from my own experience through trial and error, through failure and success, and through all my experience combined, that I am convinced that me, just like I said, I'm never going to drink again. I wasn't able to do it. It's the same experience I'm going to have with these character defects that I say, I'm not going to participate in these anymore. I'm going to wish this fear away. I'm going to will it away, right? I'm going to stop looking at booty every time it walks by, whatever it may be, right? And I say that, and I'm saying it freely in the glass house. Right? I really am, because I know I'm an alcoholic and I'm a man and I know what that's like. And the girls, I don't know what it's like to be a girl, but I know we're all alcoholics and we're very similar in whatever our defects may be. You see? And I get lonely and I want to be in this weird approval thing. That's the number one. There's all kinds of different ones, but this one for approval, like I need you to approve of me. It's such an incessant chasing after the wind, because it's futile. And we get it. And the reason that we get it is because a lot of times it's because we've not done esteemable things enough for long enough in proportion to what we've done when we were drinking, the things that we did when we were on sprees, the pitiful, incomprehensible, demoralizing things that we participated in, which destroyed our self-esteem and our self-confidence and our worth and our value and our ability to, the basic desire, like the 12 and 12 would say, of self-preservation. I compromised it for a drink. And it hurt me bad. It hurt my self-esteem. And so a lot of times we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't stay consistent long enough to build up enough esteem or value or worth within us that's whole. And I get my esteem and I get my value by doing esteemable things, but I 100% find my value, my worth in my relationship with God. And I don't think that it can be found anywhere else. And so what happens is when I'm not whole there, then I'm going to need you to approve of me because I don't like myself all the way yet. And so what'll happen is when it's an approval thing is I will compromise the greatest relationships in my life. The people who already have proven to be loyal and true and honest and sincere in my life, I will compromise those relationships to get a stranger's approval. The shit's dead, and you don't even know that you do it. We don't even know that we do it. And so this codependent, approval-seeking plague, I mean that, when I say that, I mean it's a plague, right? And it takes time. Those kind of things takes time to kind of work out and to be whole with. If I'm not honest about those things, I will continue in that and it will lead me to destruction. If I'm not able to continuously change in Alcoholics Anonymous or continue to experience a semblance of happy, joyous, and free, I'm not going to be happy, joyous, and free when I'm managing my life. You're not going to be happy, joyous, and free when you manage your own life. It's not going to, it's counterproductive. When I manage, I damage. When I manage, I damage. When you manage, you damage. You see, and just like I said, every character defect is an attempt to be happy apart from God. And we are so selfish and so self-centered and so delusional and so fearful, we are going to try to find happiness apart from God without even trying. We are going to do it we don't even need a nudge. We don't even need a nudge. It's just going to happen organically. You got a question? I'm sorry, can you ask me one more time?
Yeah, the program you're talking about. Alcohol and drugs primarily, but I'll fill myself up
Absolutely. No. You don't got to set your sobriety date unless you relapse. Honest question, and I appreciate and I respect it, but we hold on to that sobriety. It's a big deal for us. Okay? Some people can stay sober off a sobriety date out of pure ego alone until they get some help. Okay? I mean that. I promise you. So you keep your sobriety date. And just because I blow it almost every way there is to blow it in my sobriety. My sponsor said, Mike, your sobriety like a Neil Young song. Weird shit happens. Weird shit, people, I called my sponsor recently, and I'll give you an experience. I got a new sponsor. I've had my sponsor that I have now, I don't know, since the spring, something like that, summer, spring. And so I've had my first sponsor, the first sponsor I had him for 8 years. He was almost like a father to me. And I had a bad breakup with a woman and found out this sponsor was sneaking, calling this woman. It fucked me up. I felt betrayed. I was already brokenhearted because she left, right? I was sick. And then I've come to find out my sponsor's shooting a shot or whatever he was doing. And so I had to get a new sponsor. And so I got a new sponsor with a guy that lived way out of state I didn't really know very well. Very difficult time because I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been very active and very open to these principles. And so it's very difficult for me to not only, to find other people who do AA in that way. And I know that I need to do it in that way for my own well-being because I've tried to kind of skim off the top and do these different things and I just got very miserable. Didn't work out with that sponsor, got another sponsor, blah, blah, blah. And then the sponsor I ended up with, I had for the last 4 years. Great guy, wonderful guy, not much of a big book guy, but still a great guy, sober for a very long time. Well, he comes to find out that he's not doing so good, and so he wants to ask the sponsor that I fired because he was talking to my lady, he wants him to be his sponsor. I was like, what the hell is this, some Twilight Zone shit going on? What is going on? And so I was like, I just am not cool with that. And so I had to get another sponsor, so I got the sponsor I have now. So establishing a relationship with somebody who's a big book guy, who's had very similar experiences as me, with the bottoms that I've had, I fell in the perfect place and it worked out completely. I got the sponsor I'm supposed to have, but it's been a transition for me. And so recently we had a couple things happen in our home group where we had a guy or two leave and they didn't leave peacefully or gracefully, they left talking shit. Let's just call it what it is. And so they got a lot of bullshit to say and so forth and so on. So one day I called my sponsor and got enough courage to say, hey man, this guy just won't shut the hell. Oh, everywhere I go, every meeting I go to, so-and-so said, so-and-so said, so-and-so said. Now I already know it's none of my business what nobody thinks of me. That's the right answer, right? But I don't want to be honest about that with my new sponsor because it seems like a stupid problem to have. But I finally had got my ass kicked enough by it, and I was talking to him, and I said, man, this son of a, I used some good words. He won't stop, and all I hear him is lying on me, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, man, I'm sorry, that's so sad. And I was like, oh, yeah. Finally, some comfort. And he's like, how bad must you be to have to talk about somebody all the time? When he fucking talking about me? He's talking about that son of a bitch I wanted to whoop his ass for talking shit. And my sponsor says, oh, he felt bad for him. I wasn't thinking about feeling bad for him. I was thinking about peeing on him. I was like, what, And he said, how sad that must be. How sad and miserable must he be to always have to talk about you or anybody else? And I was like, damn, that's pretty shitty. And so instead of me wanting to pee on him, then I had some compassion, you see? Had I not been able to tell my sponsor about that, which I didn't tell him right away, it would still be eating me. I'd be up here today in the back of my mind, I'd be having dreams of peeing. Does that make sense? I'd be very resentful. I would still hold on to that, and I say that jokingly, but what I'm trying to say is, I'd be resentful and holding on to that and stuffing it deep inside myself, acting like it's not a big deal. Why? Because the spiritual principle I already know, my ego's wrapped its hand around. Now it's none of my business what nobody thinks of me, but it's eating me alive on the inside. Do you see? Eating me alive. But I know spiritual stuff. It's not supposed to eat me alive. It's none of my business. I'm just going to push it away. Read another book. Do another third step prayer. That'll do it. No, it won't. No, it won't. It will not. That will not work. Third step prayer is good for what the third step prayer is good for. Reading books is not a bad thing. Nothing wrong with reading books. Read a million books. But we are powerless. We do not have the power to wish or will resentments, fears, character defects, or anything like that. We don't have the power to will it away. It's never going to happen. The delusion is that I'm going to. The delusion is the fear which enslaves me. The fear which keeps me keeping those things to myself enslaves me into a delusional thought that somehow, someday I'm going to beat the game in regards to this defective character. You see, Dylan?
It's like it's kind of what I'm, you know what I mean? Like staying active with that.
I agree. I cannot disagree with that 100%. So if you 100%, if you are a current 10-step worker and you're constantly doing your 10 steps all the time like you're supposed to, then those kind of things are going to come up. Yes. But if you're not a great 10-stepper and you're, sometimes you got work all day, you can't leave your job to go do a 10-step call, but you can maybe hopefully catch it in a nightly review or something like that, then absolutely. Right? But a lot of times what will happen is, well, even in that, Dylan, is something will happen. I'll be at work and I'll get a fear of something and I'll stuff it, and then I'll get off work and be like, I'll be all right. I'll be all right. Nightly review, then forgot about it. Then it comes up in a couple days. I don't want to tell them, but so-and-so is talking shit and it's really bothering me, because then I would be soft. And then it gets to talking to me, you know what I mean? And I'm not Super Mike or whatever I think I'm supposed to be, the stage characters that the fifth step would talk about. I'm no longer allowed to, but deep inside I feel like I don't deserve it. But I agree with you 100%. If you are current on your 10 step, those kind of things are going to come up. Absolutely. Make sense? Yeah. Chris?
You were talking earlier about looking for approval from others, something like that. I'm trying to remember. You got it down. From what I've found out, and you're talking about reading books all day long, one that talks about something like that is in the acceptance pamphlet. It talks about people pleasing and stuff like that. And for those that are just beginning this journey, I would suggest getting a hold of that one, because it deals with these kind of things.
Yeah.
That you're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me that, well, we can wish all we want, and I wrote this down. Wait a minute, if I can find it here, wish in one hand, bleep, bleep, bleep in the other. Which one fills up first? Not asking any of you to answer that, but all I'm asking is chew on that one.
Don't chew on the bleep, bleep, bleep. No, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with reading books. There's nothing wrong with learning. And to some degree, God's grace runs out once I become aware, right? And awareness is such a big deal. Being aware of these things is huge, but it's not enough. Just being aware of it is not enough. I have to have help. No different than alcohol or drugs or whatever that you are doing is the same thing with defects of character. Whether it's a lust thing or dishonesty or sloth, and we did the exercise with the 7 deadly sins. You could look at those 7 deadly sins at any given day, at any given time, to see kind of where you're at. And another thing, where's Dylan go? Oh. The other thing is, a lot of times, Dylan, alcoholism is way too cunning and powerful and baffling for me to always catch it on the 10th step. That's another damn thing. Like I'll catch on to some of the bigger stuff, and if I'm real good with the 10th step, I'm going to catch on to most, but a lot of stuff is just going to be sneaking on me. Alcoholism is too powerful, too cunning. That's the quote or the saying that no one ever tripped over a mountain, they trip over the molehill. Right? The mountains we can see. Big, it's there, it's exposed. So I'm not gonna trip over it, but the molehills, the ones I'm not looking for. And that's alcoholism is going to disguise itself. If you've been sober for a while, it's going to hide and disguise itself between two truths, or it's gonna hide and disguise itself behind a spiritual principle. Alcoholism's cunning, baffling, and powerful. I promise. And so when these folks hit these bottoms, and so what happens is you've been sober 9, 8 years, 10 years, and then we see a lot of people disappear. They've been sober, AIDS doesn't have the same flame as it used to, it's not as exciting as it used to be, and there's a conversation there, needless to say. Because I've been sober 16 years, and AA is just as exciting for me today as it ever has been. I promise you. And so why would it lose its zeal? Would have to be something within me, because being on the firing line with new guys, and I tell guys, like, I should be surprised, but I shouldn't be surprised by this, but I am. Meaning there's always, you sponsor a bunch of guys and your shit's going on, and one guy's saying, it's exciting. It's never ending, right? And seeing people recover. But anyway, they end up leaving Alcoholics Anonymous, and every once in a while they make it back. Every once in a while, after a 5-year stretch of no meetings, no AA, maybe they tried the church route, whatever it is, they make it back and they say, oh, I can't take it anymore. I'm crawling out of my skin. Or they commit suicide, and more often than not, they relapse. You see, that's just really the truth of the matter. But every once in a while, they make it back somehow on God's grace, and then they have to be honest with somebody about everything. Honest about what I'm thinking, about what I'm feeling, about what I'm doing when nobody else is around, right? Those kind of things, those defects of character, if we don't have or possess or pray for the humility required to be able to be honest in that way, we're not going to continue to grow in Alcoholics Anonymous. You will stunt your growth, and you will be stuck. You have reached a plateau and you're not able to leave the plateau. The only reason probably why you're not able to leave a plateau is because there's things in your life that you're not being honest about. There's things going on. Maybe you like somebody, or you fell in love with somebody, or you got a broken heart, or whatever. It doesn't matter. There's no brand new problem. Does that make sense? There's not a single thing that anybody in here can do that hasn't been done already. And when God gives me enough courage to be honest about whatever it is in my life, I really believe that we get favor. And so when I'm able to have the courage to be honest about these deeper, darker, secretive defects of character in my life, and I'm able to be with someone, just like I said, I am able to experience a unity and a community that I'm not normally able to experience. And not only that, but in the honesty, I really believe that God gives us favor. Does that make sense? I'll give you an example. I'm a contractor, as most of you know. I do like commercial, residential remodels and builds and stuff like that. Maybe when I was about 8 years sober, something like that, I've been doing work for HUD and doing these big additions and just working on them. And I would get these addition jobs. People would call my company for additions and stuff like that. And what I would do is, because I was afraid, I would just give them to a bigger contractor with the deal that I was going to do a lot of the work on the job. And that's what I always did, until somebody said, why don't you just do the damn thing yourself? And I was like, I never even thought I could do something like that. Right? So they started coming. I started taking the additions and doing the bigger jobs, which was a big blessing for us. The big jobs are not always a blessing, because you're stuck at one place for a long time and you miss out on a lot of other smaller jobs. But anyway, I think I was going through a bad breakup. I was probably 7, 8 years sober, and I was off my rocker. And so these catastrophic things that happen in our lives, which we think are the problem, really are never really the problem. They really are just indicators of something else going on. Does that make sense? And so while I thought that the relationship ending or whatever was going on was catastrophic problem, the real truth is I had a lot of dishonesty, and I had some things going on in my life that, all the defects of character that just, it's like somebody hit the brakes and they came crashing to the front, and how they came crashing to the brakes on that bus was that relationship ending. Does that make sense? And so I'm out here trying to make money, and now I'm all empty on the inside because I had formed in me an attachment, an unhealthy attachment to another human being, which some people in Alcoholics Anonymous will say, you made them your higher power. We say that and we think, I'd never make somebody my higher power. Bullshit. It can happen. Get to missing your prayers for a few days in a row or for a little while. Stop being honest about quit being honest, and you get into an intimate relationship with another human being, you will place dependence on that person. I've done it. I thought it couldn't be done. I promise you it can be done. And that happened to me. So now the relationship's ended. Now I place so much dependence on this person, and they're gone. I feel like a piece of me is missing. And my relationship with God is estranged, and now I'm doing all kinds of stuff to feel better. And if you've ever had a broken heart and you've been sober, it's terrible. It's terrible. You can't even drink a beer or nothing. You just got to feel it every day, day in and day out. It's damn awful, right? And so I get this addition job. It's like a $30,000 job. But for me at that time, $30,000 job was, the Grand Canyon. You know what I mean? It's a big deal. Now it's a little different, and it's still a big job by all means. But they gave me a down payment for the job, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 or something like that. And like a good alcoholic who's trying to fill the emptiness, I went, instead of using it to go buy lumber, I went and bought a Harley. And I'm riding around the Harley, it's going down, and here comes the customer going the other way. I'm like, oh, it was terrible. I'm telling you, it was terrible. And they're calling me, like, when are you going to start? When are you going to finish? And I'm spinning them because I don't have enough money to do it. I blew it. I'm hoping in some shit that I don't see that something's going to happen somewhere along the way that's going to make it all better. And they're calling and calling and calling, and it's getting bad. And it's eating me alive on the inside, eating me alive. And it ate me so bad, I thought I might relapse over it, and it was very scary, and I just couldn't take it no more. And I called somebody and told them what I had done. I did it. And they, instead of saying, you're stupid as, they didn't say that. They said, God's still good, and He's still got you. And He's going to make a way out of no way, blah, 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 blah. The next day, I think I was at a job doing something else. And all the time, I'm thinking all these other little jobs I'm doing is going to make enough money for me to do this job. It just wasn't working out. I had still regular bills to pay and everything. These customers called me, and I was defeated and beat. I was like done. I'm ready to just whoop my ass. Whatever you got to do to make this go away, anything. The customers call me and say, hey, do you think you can stop over? And I was like, yeah. And I knew it was, they're going to call the police on me or, hit me with something. I don't know what they were going to do. And I said, yeah, I'll be over. Can you give me about 30 minutes or so? And they said, yeah. And so when I went over there, I pulled the driveway, and they was like, come on out here in the backyard. I was like, damn, you know what I mean? This is bad. And I went out in the backyard, and I sat they had a picnic table back there, and the fella started to tell me that something about his taxes, and he has a heart condition, and he's not able to file so-and-so until he spends this money. And he reached inside of his shirt, and he pulled out the rest of the money that like $20-some thousand in cash. And he handed it to me, and he said, I got to get this money so I can do this. Is this going to be okay? And I was like, what the hell is going on? I was like, what is going on? And what I seen in that deal is that in my little bit of willingness to be honest with another alcoholic about the bullshit I had done, jacking them people's money off and being dishonest with them and spinning them, and finally telling someone the truth. And the humility, and God met me in my humility. And so I felt isolated and I felt separated by my dishonesty, and I felt like a poor person and a crappy piece of crap. I've been an integral businessman. You know, I grew my business on spiritual principles. And here I am doing what I hear about other contractors doing on TV and shit. And I did not want to be that, and it was eating me alive. And somehow I mustered up enough willingness, God willing, to be honest with another alcoholic about what was going on and how much it was eating me alive, and God blessed me. God knew my heart. He knew I felt bad about it. He knew I wanted to make it better. And I'm not saying that anybody should do that, because I don't know that your result will be the same. You see, I don't know that. But I promise you, when they said, come over here to the backyard behind the garage, I didn't think they was going to give me money. It was the farthest thing I could ever think of. You see? And so they gave me the money, and you know what I did? I did the next right thing. I got busy on that job, I put everything to the side and got that job done. I did whatever I had to do. I took the loss because I was about to Harley. You know, it was my loss already. And so I did whatever I had to do to make sure that they got what they wanted. And you know what's going on? This person refers me all the time for jobs. They are like my best referral. How is that possible? Not in my own strength, not in my own way am I able to do that. I have to be willing to be honest with somebody about all the things in my life, and God does the rest, right? The willingness. Am I willing to be humble in that way all the time in my sobriety? As if I'm 2 years sober or 3 years sober and life's starting to get good, am I still willing to practice enough humility to be honest with you about the things that are going on inside of my head, about the things I do when no one's around, about the things I say when no one's around, about how I treat my family and treat the dog and what I do in traffic and all these different things? Am I willing to practice that humility? Am I willing then, therefore, to say, my Creator, I'm now willing, we should go do that prayer pretty soon, because I am not going to be able to do that on my own. I'm not going to be able to will or force or fight my character defects away. I have to have God's help. Does that make sense, you guys? And so I hope I can, the hope here tonight is obviously so that we all have a little bit more understanding, but I hope and pray that somebody in here, I guarantee, I know I would bet my Harley on it. There's people in this room tonight that got stuff going on in their life that you're not willing to be honest about. I know it for sure. I'd bet anything in the world on it. And I pray and I hope that in tonight's meeting, and we go to the chapel and pray the 7-step prayer, that you will be given enough courage and willingness to call somebody and be honest about whatever that stuff is. Because my guess is, if you keep on to it, you're probably not going to stay sober. You see? And that's terrible. But if you keep on to it, you won't never be happy. You won't be able to experience the joy and the happiness that we all are. It's freely given to us. You're going to miss it. And I hope and pray with all my heart that nobody in here has to do that for another single day. Make sense? All right, let's go to chapel and pray a 7-step prayer together. So in the initial writing of the big book, it said humbly on our knees. You don't have to, but just a tidbit of information about original writing. And so tonight, when we're in the chapel, sacred place, I want you to take a moment or two. We'll take a quiet time, listen to the quiet, think about the things in your life you're not willing to be honest about. And we get an opportunity to go to God. We don't have to come good. We don't have to come perfect. We legitimately can come as we are, good and bad. And that's what the prayer is going to pray. And so God already knows. And when we stuff it deep inside of ourselves, we're just thinking we're hiding. We're not hiding from nobody but our own selves. And so I want you to consider the defects of character, the ones you've been keeping a secret, the things that you've not been honest about, or whatever else in your life that's going on. And I'll pray a sentence, and then, because I know everybody in here don't remember it, and then if the group would just repeat after me. But we're going to take a moment of silence. Please take this time to think about what those things might be for you. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. Please remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Good job.